China just slashed interest rates, but they're acting like it's no big deal. Yeah, right. They're scrambling behind the scenes while pretending they've got it all under control. Rate cuts, stalled trade, and a weakening yuan all scream desperation. Add in those shady IP violations and fentanyl allegations. This isn't just economics, it's warfare in disguise. Watch the full video to see what China's really up to before it hits your wallet.
Thing number 4. This would be thing number 3 on the written version. Again, we did the educational piece at the top of the show for this week. This is the AI for Everyone issue from Deep Knowledge Investing. Be sure to head to our website, deepknowledgeinvesting.com. Grab a subscription there to make sure you don't miss anything. So, Gary, going right back to China, talking about them cutting interest rates. They're desperate for stimulus while pretending they don't care about a tariff deal with the U.S. That's directly from the written version of the 5 things. Gary, thing number 4, China's surprise rate cuts. Let's follow on to talk about this right after thing number 3.
Yeah, Rob. So one thing I've found hilarious over the last month is I've seen Chinese trade negotiators say, we don't care if we get a deal with the United States. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. Well, if that's the case, why are they cutting rates? They're, of course, cutting rates because they're desperate to stimulate their economy, which is not doing great. And China has similar debt problems to the United States. You know, on the show, we talk a lot about the US's massive debt and our overspending, but it would be a mistake to think the rest of the world doesn't have these problems, in particular China. So last week, in order to stimulate their economy, we talked earlier in the show about how lower interest rates incentivizes people to build and grow the economy, start businesses. They cut their 7-day repo rate from 1.5% to 1.4%. They lowered other relevant benchmark rates as well. And so, you know, after the U.S. placed steep tariffs on Chinese goods, there were concerns that trade activity would contract, there'd be less of it, orders spiked ahead of tariff implementation. That's something we talked about in last week's 5 things. And so what China is trying to do is soften that economic blow, which led to last week's rate cuts. The other important thing on this is, remember, we were talking earlier in the show, if you lower your interest rates, that results in a weaker currency. So the reason China wants to do that is because if they lower rates and they weaken the yuan, then it's something China's done many times in the past to support its mercantilist policies. That will result in a weaker currency for them. And what that means is that their exports will be priced more cheaply, and it'll be more expensive for the Chinese people to import foreign goods. This was their way of responding to President Trump's tariff implementation, basically saying we'll stimulate our economy and we'll weaken our currency. That was their response, which is fine. They're entitled to do that. But, it's kind of funny when they say we don't care, it doesn't matter, and then they take these actions.
Right. Gary, what does this do for China's export economy?
Well, the key thing here, Rob, is if they weaken their currency, right? Lower interest rates means holding their currency is less attractive, and so it weakens their currency. What that means is that Chinese goods priced in their currency will be cheaper. And so they're saying we are going to continue to export. And remember, a weaker currency for them means imports are more expensive. So basically, what they're communicating to the world is that they intend to continue to run gigantic trade surpluses. And, is that a bad thing? Well, I understand why China wants to do it. It's good for them, but it's not necessarily advantageous to their trading partners. The other thing that's worth pointing out, because these things all have multi-part variables. One of the things that President Trump has reasonably complained about is he's said that the Chinese government has intentionally flooded the U.S. with fentanyl to try to addict and kill Americans. China's denied that. However, last week, the Epoch Times came out with a well-sourced article saying that this was Chinese government policy, that they were intentionally trying to flood the U.S. market with deadly drugs, trying to addict and kill Americans, trying to hurt as many people as possible. And one part of the agreement, or rather potential agreement, that was announced this morning is China has agreed to try to cooperate with the United States to reduce fentanyl exports from China, imports into the United States. If they weren't doing it, then how can they help, right? It's basically an admission that they've been part of this. This has clearly been part of, their multi-dimensional warfare. And what they're doing is horrible. And, we think the Chinese should apologize for this wrong action.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting stuff there, Gary. Great points. And I completely agree. We have to draw a line in the sand.